Out of Six Flags Magic Mountain's 20 roller coasters, one of the most pure fun ones is West Coast Racers, a Premier Rides dueling launch coaster that opened to the public on January 9, 2020. It may not be the tallest, fastest, longest, or most intense coaster at the park or in the world, but it does a lot right, and this was a great addition to the park back in 2020. Now, this ride was originally supposed to open a year prior in 2019. And technically speaking, it did open for pass holders in December, but as mentioned, it didn't open to the public until 2020. This was caused from a bunch of construction delays. This ride just took forever to build. But they finally got it open, and it's been very well received ever since. I got to experience it for my first time in March of 2024. Now, while I do enjoy West Coast Racers, it does admittedly feel a little bit redundant. You have Twisted Colossus, a Mobius dueling coaster, and Full Throttle, a Premier Rides launch coaster. So naturally, Magic Mountain added a Premier Rides Mobius dueling launch coaster. See what I mean? It really doesn't make a ton of sense. If Twisted Colossus and Full Throttle had a kid, there's no doubt that West Coast Racers is their child. Now, what is a Mobius dueling coaster? A Mobius dueling coaster is a coaster that has two tracks, and you get to go on both tracks in the same ride experience. This is different from your typical dueling coaster, which has two completely separate tracks. This approach is much better, and it allows you to experience the whole ride without having to get back in line. And one of the first things you notice when you're walking around the underground area is that West Coast Racers has terrific interaction between the white side and the yellow side. This ride cycles constantly, and from what I saw, has some of the best operations in the entire park, which isn't always that high of a standard, but it's still good to see. They always run pre-trains. If you want to ride this ride, I would recommend doing it early in the day. This, despite the operations, is one of the most popular rides in the entire park, and it makes sense. It's a good ride that's approachable for a lot of people. If you're coming from the front of the park and the front entrance, you're going to take a right and go all the way to the back. This is a decent walk. The footage I'm showing here isn't even all of it. If you decide to try to hit this ride first, there will be no one in the underground area for the first few minutes of park opening. Now, West Coast Racers didn't actually open with the park on the day we attempted this, but Apocalypse opened shortly after park opening, and we were able to stay on the train for back-to-back laps. The bottom line is that getting to West Coast Racers early in the day, even if it's not in the first 30 minutes, is not a bad idea. I've alluded to the area this ride is located in, the underground, but let's talk about it more in depth for a minute. The underground has a nice theme, and it was redone when this ride opened. From what I hear, this is a vast improvement over this old area of the park. Apocalypse is still here. There's a taco place across the way from West Coast Racers, but I think the anchor is the Premier Rides launch coaster. Another great thing about West Coast Racers is the theming. Not a whole lot of rides at Magic Mountain have themed queue lines, but West Coast Racers, and Apocalypse for that matter, are two of them. This isn't Disney level or anything, but the bottom level of the queue is designed to look like a West Coast Customs garage, and I think it's well done. The blue car, as well, located at the front of the building, is a nice touch. That's definitely the highlight. You then go up a staircase and enter the station. This coaster handles loose articles a bit different than some of the other coasters at the park. You drop your stuff off in bins to the right of the coaster before you board, and then pick it up after you ride. I like how you don't have any of your stuff with you when you board the train. It makes it a bit easier, but I don't love how everyone exits and boards on the same side of the station. It can cause a little bit of congestion. That said, it's not a huge deal. These coasters' trains are comfortable enough once you get in them, but that's the trick, isn't it? As someone who's pretty tall, these trains can be very difficult to get into. And they're difficult enough without the comfort collars, but when you add that over the shoulder restraint, it becomes even more challenging. Suffice to say, Premier Rides trains are some of the tighter ones I've seen from a major manufacturer. With all that preamble out of the way, let's start in on the actual ride experience. You start on the white side, and after rolling out of the station, you hit your first launch. Admittedly, this is not the most powerful of launches out there. This ride does have a top speed of 55 miles an hour, which isn't bad, but I'm not sure if you hit it on this moment or not. Next is the high five. I think the high five is good on both sides, but on the white side, it's especially good. In fact, I think this was surprisingly good. On the white side, you get an excellent quick pop of ejector airtime. Is it sustained? Well, no, not really. But if you hold down those comfort collars, you won't get neck chopped, and that makes it better too. While on the topic, hold down the comfort collars during the ride so you can fully appreciate the airtime without getting chopped. The white side then perfectly transitions from airtime to hang time. This is one of the best moments on the coaster too. It's a 0G stall, and you hang upside down just long enough to hang out of your seat, and then you move on to the next moment. I think the start of West Coast Racers is strong. The high five followed by the 0G stall are the best two elements. From here, you twist to the right and dip down into your first LSM boost. It's kind of weird because about halfway through the launch, you feel a significant jolt. It's not really uncomfortable, though if you do have your head forward, you might slam back into the seat a little bit, and that leads you into your first corkscrew. This ride has 3 of them, and I feel like they all come close to giving hang time, but falling just short. You then twist to the left in your first of 2 helixes and a spaghetti bowl. You then pop over a hill that doesn't give any airtime and go into the second half of the helix, this time to the right. You come out of it and twist into the pit stop, which marks the halfway point of the ride. The spaghetti bowl section on the white side is fun, but I do think it's a bit stronger on the yellow side, which we'll get to right about now. So the yellow side starts with that pit stop. There's a couple of props in here and a screen to your left to move the story forward. Don't expect anything too extravagant, but it's a really nice touch, and it's certainly better than waiting in an empty, quiet building. The amount of time you're in there varies. Some rides, it's not very long at all, and other rides, you do wait in there a little too long and it breaks up the pacing. It just depends on how fast they dispatch the train on the other side. But when both trains are ready, you inch forward and hit launch 2. This one feels pretty identical to the first one, not terribly powerful, but it is a nice way to start off the second half. You then fly into that high 5 element, which is still good, but a little weaker than the white side. You're twisting under the 0G stall for the white side, then twisting to the right and down into the LSM boost, which feels pretty similar to the white side. From here, you step up into your second corkscrew, running parallel to the white sides. From here, you do the yellow side's version of the spaghetti bowl. It's pretty much the same as the first go round, except I feel as if it's a bit more intense. To be clear, you're not graying out or anything like that. It's nowhere near as intense as Goliath's Helix in the same park. But it is a nice moment of force, and by the time you pull out of it, I think you can feel it. West Coast Racers then gives you one more inversion in the form of corkscrew, and then you hit the brakes. I appreciate how the last corkscrew was placed on the yellow side and not the white side to add a little bit more flair to the finale. So there you have it. There's your 4 inversion 4,000 foot long coaster. West Coast Racers is a great length. Each track on its own might feel a little bit short, but you put them together and it's a great length. One thing we haven't really talked about a ton is this ride's calling card, the dueling feature. According to RCDB, there are 14 crosses of the track. Premier Rides did an excellent job making these tracks run alongside one another. It's a really cool feature to look down if you're upside down, or look to the side of you during a helix and see the other train going by you. It adds energy and adds a little bit of competitive spirit. It's extra fun in particular if you know someone on the other train, and it's almost more fun to split up your party between trains so you can duel each other and notice each other during the ride. There are a bunch of dueling coasters in the world, but I think there are a few that duel as well as West Coast Racers does, not only from a visual standpoint, but also from the standpoint that you are guaranteed to duel every single time. As mentioned at the top, this park already has a dueling coaster in Twisted Colossus. The problem that many people have talked about with that ride is not the layout, it's the fact that it doesn't duel every single time, and now it's really rare to duel. The pit stop feature fixes Twisted Colossus's problem, and because of that, you're guaranteed to race on every single ride, which is a good thing for a racing themed coaster. It would be a little bit disappointing to have a racing themed dueling coaster not duel every time. Twisted Colossus has its problems, but Premier and Magic Mountain were able to fix them with the addition of this ride, and I absolutely love that and appreciate it. So how is the smoothness of West Coast Racers? Premier is known for having very smooth coasters, and this is another one that roughness is not an issue. If it were, those comfort collars could make the ride a little bit uncomfortable, but as I said, if you hold those down on those moments where you're hanging sideways and the moments where you could potentially get neck chopped, it won't impact the ride at all. This ride isn't very tall, but if you look at the rest of its stats, you would think this is one of the more thrilling rides at the park. 55 miles an hour, 4 inversions, 4,000 feet of track, but I think it's kind of a family thrill ride. Granted, it would lean more to the thrill side, but it's not as intense as a lot of other launch coasters out there. So, West Coast Racers, when it comes to giving this ride a final score, what are we going to give it? I think a 9 out of 10 is well earned and perfectly deserved. Is it the best coaster in the park? Well, no, but I do think it's borderline top 3, and I don't think it does anything inherently wrong. Would this have been the addition that I would have chosen for Magic Mountain? Probably not, but I think it's a good one, and it's one of the better coasters in the park. It's one of those rides that's just approachable enough for families and just thrilling enough for thrill seekers. So I think it's obvious enough that I think you should absolutely take a spin on West Coast Racers when you go to Six Flags Magic Mountain. So there are my thoughts on Six Flags Magic Mountain's second newest roller coaster. If you enjoyed it and learned something, I would appreciate it if you gave this video a like and considered subscribing down below. We'll have more coaster reviews and plenty other non-review oriented content coming out soon. So thank you all for watching, and I'll see you next time.